Hello and good morning. We're going to be working through some more free code camp basic algorithm scripting challenges here. And today we've got kind of a doozy. This one took a lot more research than the other ones and took some fiddling with to get it to kind of work. And basically, I had to search through some Stack Overflow stuff as well as the provided resources to kind of figure out what was going on. So hopefully I can make this a little bit easier for you. And what I'm talking about is the Seek and Destroy challenge. And here we're going to be working with arguments. And so let's take a look at this and what we're trying to do. And right now we are taking a function, and what I want to do is I want to take in an array, all right, for my argument. And then I have going to have two other things in here, whether they're numbers or whether it's a string. And what I'm going to want to do is if any of these things in the first array match anything else, I want to get rid of them or seek and destroy. And we are directed over to the arguments object and array.prototype.filter, which we just did in the previous challenge, which seems pretty simple. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is all of this stuff here I have written down. And initially, when I was looking through for this, I had to just kind of Google it. And like usual, you end up on Stack Overflow reading for a while. And it took me quite a while to figure out exactly what's going on here. So I'm going to try to explain this the best that I can. So the first thing that we want to take a look at is the provided resources here. And we have arguments. So we all have been using arguments, all right? Arguments are what we're taking into our functions that we use to access certain things. Sometimes we use them to access like a function, or whether it's a simple object like a number or a string. So what is it exactly, an argument? So an argument is an object, is an array-like object. So this is what was really the hang-up here. It's an array-like object. So it's an object, but it's an array-like object. It's not an actual array. So you cannot apply array methods directly to it. You have to do something else to it before you can start using it like a normal array. So here we go. Here we have this right here, and this is where I was getting hung up here, and this is what I've used as my starting point here. And so the argument object is not an array. It is similar to an array, but does not have any array properties except for length. So you can say arguments.length, and it'll give you the length of how many arguments you have there, whether it's a string or a list of numbers, so on. For example, it does not have a pop method. However, it can be converted into a real array. Okay, so here you go. If you say something like array.prototype.slice.call arguments, all right, what you can do is you can generate an actual array out of this array-like object. So the very first thing I'm going to do with all of my arguments when I bring it in here is I'm going to convert my arguments into an array that I can apply array methods to, which is going to be much better. So we know that the destroyer function that we want is going to take in arguments, all right? And the arguments, we're going to have an array, and the first object in that array is going to be a subarray. And we want to separate out our subarray, which is going to be things that we want to check for, versus everything else in that array, which is everything else we want to check against. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is we have these args, all right, which I just is my variable. And again, I just took that right off of here because it says, use args. So again, I just copy and paste it right out of here. All right, and then we know that we're going to have an array.prototype as well. So that's one of the questions you might have here. The array prototype just represents a property. So anytime you see array.prototype, that is a property. A lot of times, if you look over here, you've been doing your research, you'll notice it says like array.prototype, concat, so on and so forth. But here you can actually define your own array properties, such as here they've generated one for array prototype called first. And if the array doesn't have the prototype first, add first, which is a function which just returns this, which is whatever this is, this array, in the 0th position of that array. All right, so it's the first object in that array. So you can now call first as a array method on those arrays. I know I'm saying array a lot, but hopefully this makes sense. Otherwise, you can go back and read through this a little bit more as well to try to get a better handle on what's going on there. So anyway, we're going to take an array-like object, we're going to turn it into an array, and then now I can use these arguments like I would normally do. All right, so the whole purpose of this is if I tried to take this array of a subarray and 2 numbers and use it like I normally would, I would get an error because it's an argument, not an actual array object. So now the args is an array object, and I'm just going to isolate this first subarray. And how am I going to do that? Well, I can just use my splice. All right, remember we've used that a few times, so I can just say args dot splice. And now remember, if this is an array, our 0th position is this entire subarray. Then we have a first position and a second position. So when I want to splice, I can pick a start and an end point, and it's going to cut before the objects I have here. So if I say the 0th position, this is the 0th position, it's going to start by cutting before that, comma 1, and then here's the first position, it's going to cut before that. So now my args that we have here, all right, I have now spliced this right here to isolate that array. Okay, so it's placing out my initial array. All right, I can end that sentence. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I have an ARR, okay, and then I have my args. Now my args is just this first subarray, and my ARR, my arguments, is an array-like object that has a 0th position here, all right, a first and a second. And I've spliced out and separated out this subarray. So what I want to do is I want to iterate through each object in this array, and then I want to check it against each object in this here, starting with the first position all the way to the length, because remember we can use the array method length. You see, properties except for length exist on this argument, so that is going to be helpful to us. So I'm going to be using a for loop again. Now we've used for loops to iterate through arrays, so I'm going to use a for loop to iterate through this array, and then I'm going to use, once I'm inside of this array, then I'm going to use another for loop to check against everything else in my arguments. All right, so the first thing I want to do is to set my for loop for, and set this like I normally do, where your I equals 0. Okay, hey, that's not what I wanted. Your I equals 0, right? And you're going to be iterating through this loop for the I is less than the ARR dot length. And remember, this is an array method that we can use on our arguments. Now, when we are going to be iterating through these, what I'm looking at is the length here. All right, but I really don't want the length itself. What I'm looking for is the length plus 1, because I want to count through the first array itself. Okay, so whatever this array is here, it'll be that plus 1. So I want to count through that. So length plus 1. Okay, semicolon, and then I will increment that by plus. Now here we can enter in what we want to do here. All right, so now we have this, and I'm going to nest another loop in here. And what I want to do is I want to count through my various destroyers here, which is going to be things I'm going to use to destroy in there. So everything that's a 2 and a 3 in here is going to get destroyed. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to do another for loop that counts through those as well. So we're going to go inside of here. All right. And so let's say that we have I sub 0. So we're going to start here. And what we want to do is we're going to be counting through this and say like 2. And so is 1, 2? No. Is 2, 2? Yes. And then I need to do something here. So I need to say if they match, I have to kill it. Then I'm going to say is 3, 2? No. Is 1, 2? No. Is 2, 2? Yes. I want to destroy that. So I'm going to be using an if statement and so on and so forth. Then I want to move to this 3, so on and so forth as well. All right. So here we go. So we have our args and we have our array here. So let's take a look at our array. And what I want to do is another for loop. For, and instead of I, since I already used I, I'll just use J as the next letter. Set that equal to 0. And then again, so as long as J is less than. Now you see what I want to do is, since I want to take each one of these and I want to count through this here, this first array is no longer the argument. It's actually this new variable that's an array that I used because I wanted to just slice this. Since I wanted to slice it, I had to place this in a new variable called args, and I had to actually create an array there. So this is a new array that is spliced here. So when I want to count through this, I don't want to count through the arguments. I want to count through this new variable here, which is basically just this first array. So here we go, args length. Again, this is going to be +1. All right, so here we go. And then I can say J++. Now, what do I want to do if we get a match? Okay, so now I'm iterating through this array and I'm checking it against every single piece of that array. So I'm iterating through 2 arrays to look for matches. So what do I want to do? All right, so I'm going to start off and I'll have, let's say, for I, so arr.length. So I right now will be like 0. All right, and I want to be checking that at that 0th position. So here we go. So what is that going to look like? So let me open up I need an if statement in here. So if those 2 things are equal, delete it. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. So if my array, so I, is exactly equal to my args, J, okay, what do I want to do? So I'm saying if this 2 equals 1, nope, that's false. If 2 equals 2, ooh, that's true. Okay, so then I go inside this if statement. What do I want to do? All I want to do is delete, space here, delete this ARR I. Boom. Okay, so let's take a look at this one more time. So I have args here. All right, and args I'm going to use to slice. All right, call. So what this slice call does is it says that I want to take these arguments and I want to make it an actual array. Okay, which is right here. I took that right out of this, and then I've been double checking this on Stack Overflow to try to figure out exactly what it's doing. And essentially it's doing the same thing. And you could take a look at exactly what the call argument does and why you need to slice call it and get into some of those details as well. But again, that you can take some of the research on that. And then I'm going to be using a splice again. And so when I go into prototype array.splice, let's from does. So here I have a splice with a 2 values in here, and it's going to have a start count and a delete count. So my splice, all right, I'm starting at the 0th position, okay, which is here, all right, and then I am cutting everything off there, all right, so that's my splice. All right, so right now I'm just have this first array for my args, okay? So I'm going to go through my args, and now I have that spliced, which is a real array. So I'm just going to iterate through my array object through everything that is here. And as I'm iterating through this main array, I have to look for things that I want to destroy. Okay. I'm going to go inside of this first thing, which is my args. Okay. And I want to go through this. So I'll have, starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And I'm going to be checking against it. And if I get a match from all of this stuff inside of here, I'm just going to delete that. Okay. We're going to have one more issue that we're going to have to work through for this one. And I'm going to show you this right now. So if we run this test, these falses here, none of this is actually working. All right. So what is happening here? Well, what's happening here, all right, is that we're not returning anything. So my function is just stuck inside that function. It doesn't return anything. So after I go through and I have my for, so I have my if, my for, my for. So I need to return at this point. Let's return the arguments and see what I get. Oh, look, when I delete the values out of an array, I'm left with null. Null, 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 null. Now, if you remember from the previous challenge that we did, all right, with that falsy bouncer, we were able to get rid of all of those null values or all of those false Boolean values by just applying a filter method to our ARR dot filter, right, and Boolean. Okay. And let's see what we get here. Way cool, it actually works. All right, perfect. All right, so there's a lot of stuff for you to take a look at here. We have nested for loops. We used a splice. We took an array like object, an argument, an array like object, and we turned it into a real array so we could actually splice it. And then we've done a comparative statement using if, all right? And then we've deleted objects from an array, which left us with null or blank spots in the array. And then we had to go back through and then filter out all of those null or blank values. So that was a lot of stuff for one video. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you next time.